If you are listening to this episode right now, then congratulations! You survived 2 weeks to slow the spread of COVID-19. Oh, well that's wonderful. Does that mean that I can get back to work now? Oh no, Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. You still have a lot to learn. Because after the 2 weeks to slow the spread was over, state governments will issue crippling lockdowns and restrictions, making the possibility for going back to work almost impossible. Here, take a stimulus check. There'll be more where that came from. Wow, thank you, mister. I was just really hoping that after a year of this that we may be able to get back to normal. You know, get our jobs, make our own money, not having to rely on the government for all of our needs. Well, you would think that, Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. The sad reality is no. What do you mean no? I just got both of the vaccine shots. This should mean that I should be able to walk outside my house without a mask. Maybe even see my grandparents once or twice a week. Oh no, Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. This isn't true at all. As according to the CDC and even Dr. Fauci, we must keep our masks on 100% of the time so we don't spread COVID-19. So basically you're telling me that in one whole year, nothing has really changed. Yes, Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket, that is exactly what I'm saying. Nothing has changed. COVID is still out. Still wear a mask. And even if you get the vaccine, you're still gonna need to wear a mask. And you might not be able to see your grandkids. Well, I just have one simple question. When does this actually end? Well, that is a wonderful question, Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. No one put that on my note sheet. Let me see, 1 second. I have bad news for you, Kyle Dockery and the Dockery Docket, and also all of your listening audience. This may never end. What's going on, everybody? It's Kyle Dockery with the Dockery Docket. We are here with our very 60-second episode of the Dockery Docket. I'm excited to be here, and I hope that you are excited to be here as well. So, today is a very special episode, if you could actually put it that way, as this week was the 1-year anniversary of the grand plan to end COVID-19. 2 weeks to slow the spread. So basically the idea for 2 weeks to slow the spread was if we could all stay home for 2 weeks, then the spread of the virus would go down. As a result of this, the hospital systems would not be overrun, meaning that if people were sick, they could go to the hospital without there being like 16,000 people in one hospital. Who knew that 2 weeks to slow the spread actually meant 1 year? And here's the thing, if this whole 2 weeks to slow the spread system actually worked, then after these 2 weeks, we'd all have been able to go back to work. Meaning that most people would have 2 weeks of inconvenience, maybe binging The Tiger King or something like that, but then after the 2 weeks, they would be able to go back to work, go back to their normal lives, do the things that average Americans do. This is honestly what I thought back in the day. As looking back on some of my older episodes, like the battle for the last roll of toilet paper where I first mentioned COVID-19, along with the Quarantine Chronicles, which is the very first video I ever recorded in my room, which I'm still recording in my room now, so that's been a staple. Anyway, in these episodes, I could tell that I was very optimistic at best about COVID-19. I thought that this virus would go away very, very quickly, and that these 2 weeks to slow the spread would be effective in preventing the spread of COVID-19. However, I did have some doubts in the government, as in episode 19, I made a point that I believe was true then, and is still true now. Take a listen to this. Of course, it's with my crappy audio, but just deal with it.
The issue is that there doesn't seem to be an end in sight. The president and the government of Michigan are saying 15 days. But what happens when the 15 days are over? Are we able to go back to work? Are we able to go back to school? Will lives go back to normal after these 15 days? Or is this the new normal?
Is this ever going to end is something that I was asking then, and it is something that I am asking now. As back then, after the 2 weeks to slow the spread were over, different states decided that they were going to lock down. This meant that the states where this was implemented were at a standstill. All businesses were closed, restaurants were closed, everything was shut down. These lockdowns usually lasted for a few weeks, and there would be a specific deadline for these orders to be ended or renewed. I remember we would get so close to reaching that deadline date, and we would be thinking, we're gonna reopen, and then all of a sudden, the governor would dump more restrictions down for another couple of weeks. Sometimes with these different lockdowns, we would get special privileges taken away because we the people were bad. Like in Michigan, we got restaurants shut down for a very, very long time for not listening to the governor and spreading COVID. Along with that, in Michigan, Governor Whitmer also banned seeds because we were being bad. Anyway, this was an endless cycle that looked like it was never going to end. And 1 year later, we are still dealing with this predicament. As we have definitely flattened the curve, however, there are still people that are out of work and are wanting to get back to work as quickly as possible. And there is a possibility that we may get our privileges taken away. This time not from a governor, but from the President of the United States. As last Thursday, Joe Biden made a speech on the anniversary of when COVID-19 reached the nation. And in that speech, he explained that he was aiming for the goal of July 4th being the time period where we could have some of our privileges back. And maybe, hang out with some of our family members. Take a listen to this.
If we do this together, by July the 4th, there's a good chance you, your families and friends will be able to get together in your backyard or in your neighborhood and have a cookout or a barbecue and celebrate Independence Day. That doesn't mean large events with lots of people together, but it does mean small groups will be able to get together. After this long, hard year, that will make this Independence Day something truly special.
Okay, so basically what Joe Biden is saying here is be good little Americans, and maybe I will let you have a little bit of freedom on the day that we celebrate our freedom. This all just cracks me up because we seriously went from 2 weeks to slow the spread to 1 year later, maybe if you are really, really good, you can have a small barbecue with your friends and family. As I've already said before, this is a never-ending thing. And more than likely, what will happen is July 4th will come around and the government will say, well, we're sorry. You weren't good enough. You can't have a party. What the government and Joe Biden don't know is that there are people, and even states, that are getting back to normal, even though the federal government has said something different. With COVID, we have learned so much in the past year, and one of the biggest things that we have learned from the scientists is that states that didn't lock down are doing much better than states that had strict lockdowns. Now, this may be a controversial statement, but we can see from the facts that this is true. As if we take a look at this graph right here, we can see that the deaths per 100,000 people were higher in states like New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, which all had very extreme lockdowns. This is compared to states like Florida and Texas, who didn't have very strong lockdowns compared to these other states. As if we once again look at this graph, Florida is all the way down to 27th when it comes to deaths per 100,000 people. Now, there is a possibility that all of this could be because New York and New Jersey are both urban areas, where people are right on top of each other, and in Florida and other states like Wyoming and Alaska, there's a lot of land and not a lot of people. So people are more spread out, meaning that the virus doesn't spread as much in those states. However, the fact is, if lockdowns worked, the numbers should not be like this. Florida should be having a terrible time, and New York should be just fine because they slowed the spread of COVID by locking people up in their house. However, this is not what is happening. And there are some other underlining factors on why New York, New Jersey, Michigan, California had troubles with COVID-19. Because during the whole pandemic, we learned that it wasn't smart for these different states to put people that had COVID-19 into nursing homes. This caused the disease and deaths to rise in these different facilities. As it was reported by the New York Times that 34% of COVID-19 deaths were from old folks' homes. So putting COVID-positive people in there was like throwing a match into dry brush in California. It led to more people dying than should have. I'm looking at you, Cuomo and Whitmer. What should have happened is that we should have guarded the old folks' homes and made sure that they were safe, and maybe have let younger people go back to work. Because it is no secret that these lockdowns and also these restrictions that are a mile long have caused businesses to shutter and has caused the economy to tank. According to the Wall Street Journal, In June, almost 30 million jobs were lost due to the lockdowns and other COVID-19 restrictions. And some of these jobs will never come back, as some businesses, especially small businesses, don't have the resources that they need to make a comeback, like maybe Amazon or other big retailers do. It is a sad reality that we all have to face. These jobs, these businesses, these companies may not be coming back. However, luckily for America, some states are starting to open up and loosen their restrictions. We can see that people are starting to get jobs, and they are trying to make the economy better. As it was reported back in August by MarketWatch, that 9.3 million jobs were added back to the economy, which is a very good thing even though it is a very small dent. We are moving in the right direction, as states and the American economy are trying to recover the best that they can. However, for states that didn't have a massive shutdown, their economy is recovering a lot better, as some people may not have even stopped working through this whole pandemic. Their lives were mostly normal, except they may have had to wear a mask or something like that. According to this chart, it explains that states that had massive lockdowns, like New York, California, Massachusetts, had unemployment numbers of 15.9%, 13.3%, and 16.1% respectively. On the reverse of this, states like Utah and Nebraska maintained their unemployment, as the states kept it both at 4.5 to 4.8%. With all of this being said, I believe that it is time to open up our economy and have people get back to work as quickly as possible. We can clearly see that these lockdowns are not needed, and some of these different restrictions are not needed as well, especially now that we have a vaccine that, according to science, helps lower the symptoms of COVID-19. It is not a 100% cure, which is also very important to remember. Once again, my opinion on vaccines has remained the same. If you want to go and get the vaccine, go ahead. And if you don't want to get the vaccine, that's fine too. Just realize that there are risks for either getting the vaccine or for not getting the vaccine. Anyway, with all of these vaccines, what we have learned from these different vaccines is that they have been more effective when older people are the ones that are getting the COVID-19 shot first. As older people are the ones that are dying more of COVID, so it makes sense that we would get to them first. And we have seen this in the country of Israel, which, yes, is a country, as it was reported that 90% of people aged 60 and older have received round 1 of the 2-shot vaccine. Data collected by Israel's Ministry of Health show that there was a 41% drop in confirmed COVID-19 infections. This is, of course, fantastic news, as it shows that the vaccine is working. And if this vaccine is working, then this means that we could all go back to normal life again, right? We could end the lockdowns. We can end the stay-at-home orders. There may be a possibility that we could stop wearing these stupid masks, right? Right? Well, not exactly. According to the CDC, even if you have the vaccination, you still have to keep the mask on and social distance and all that stuff, even though the chance of you getting the virus is lower after the vaccine. The CDC explains for people that are already vaccinated, you should still take steps to protect yourself and others in many situations, like wearing a mask, staying at least 6 feet apart from others, and avoiding crowds in poorly ventilated spaces. Take these precautions whenever you are in public, gathering with unvaccinated people from more than one other household, visiting with an unvaccinated person who is at an increased risk of severe illness or death from COVID-19, or who lives with a person at an increased risk. So this means if you are fully vaccinated, you can't go to a party with your whole family, but just with one household, unless they all had the vaccine. So it seems to me that not a lot has changed for people that have taken the vaccine. I mean, according to the CDC guidelines, you can gather with fully vaccinated people without wearing a mask. However, when it comes to older people and seeing their grandkids, whom some haven't seen in months or even a year, after they get the vaccination, they may still have to wear a mask, and they may still have to socially distance from their kids and grandkids. I mean, this has to be so discouraging for older Americans that got the vaccine, thinking, hey, maybe I can see my grandkids without a mask. Or maybe I could see them and hug them without them giving me COVID or me giving them COVID. I mean, for a personal example, I remember when COVID was first happening, and we were all pretty nervous about my nanny, as we definitely didn't want her to get COVID. So we would FaceTime her, we would make her cards, and we would all social distance outside of her house. Then one day we were like, this needs to change. We need to live our lives. Then we started to go into her house and her into our house, and she was happy. I couldn't imagine for a minute if we decided to lock her in her house for a whole year. And then once a vaccine comes out, we get so excited and say, hooray, we might be able to see Nanny again. And then the CDC is like, wait a minute. If your family isn't fully vaccinated, then you can't visit her. And sadly, this is what many families have done to try and protect their parents or grandparents. And it has led to many heartbreaking videos, like this one, where a child is wrapped from head to toe in protective gear just to hug with his grandparents. And his grandparents are also in protective gear as well. I understand that yes, it is always good to be protected, and yes, we don't want to spread the disease. However, we as people need to learn that we can't just cram grandma and grandpa or anyone else into a house for months. This will hurt them mentally. And as we know, according to statistics, the suicide rate has risen for both older people and for younger people. Along with this, depression and loneliness are on the rise as well. And a lot of people are starting to realize this. And in return, they are understanding that we can be safe, but we can also hug our grandparents without a mask or gloves or anything else. And we can also be around other people, whether that be social distancing or not. People are starting to realize that we can safely reopen our schools and our economy because this is what people need: human contact and human interaction. People are starting to understand that the CDC, the government, and Joe Biden are not in control of you or your actions. You are. And we are starting to see this as many states are starting to open up, because cases are going down, and we are reaching the end of this pandemic, I believe. As recently, Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, came out and said that he would end the statewide mask mandate and permit all businesses to operate at full capacity. Along with this, Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves announced that he is rescinding all county mask mandates and removing all state restrictions on nearly all businesses. Continuing along this trend, 5 states including Texas, Mississippi, Iowa, Montana, and North Dakota are planning to end their mask requirements. According to Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, wearing a mask will be a matter of personal responsibility and not a government mandate, which honestly should have been how it was at the very beginning, as this is simply about personal freedom. People are starting to learn this, and this is why I believe that the end of COVID-19 is almost here. In the end, the question is this: 1 year after 2 weeks to slow the spread, 1 year of all of these different lockdowns of businesses, 1 year of locking grandma and grandpa into their house, will this pandemic ever end? The answer to this question may be twofold. For some people and for some individual states, yes, the pandemic will end and people will be able to go back to work and have regular, normal lives. However, for the government and other states, the answer is no. The pandemic will never end, and it will never be over, because they like the power. They want the control over you. And one of my biggest fears is that one day COVID-19 will truly be gone, but there will be a new virus that people will actually love. This virus will be big government. And with this virus, they will be able to lie to you. They will be able to take away your individual rights and your job, all in the name of protecting you. And they are able to shut you up by giving you a stimulus check, which in return will cause runaway inflation. We the people cannot let this stand. And this is why, after COVID-19 is over, we must demand the government give their power back to the people. Then we will be free of both the COVID-19 virus and the big government virus. And hopefully, this will lead us back to a normal life. And hopefully all of this will happen very, very soon. But until then, I just want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Dockery Docket. And until next time, like my mom always says, be good, be kind, be loving, goodbye.